So this is the process for the analog mixdown. The first thing to do is to press all the flips down on the relevant channels. In this particular song we've got 10 channels, so we press down flips from 1 to 10 at the top of the desk. Do not touch the gain, because the gain is attached to mix A and has nothing to do with mixing down. Then press down all the main mix, the left, right, a sign on every single channel, otherwise you will not be able to hear the channels. Put all the faders up so that you can hear the song, at least just play a minute or so, you can hear what the song is about and what kind of song it is. Very next, so we've got some preliminary sort of levels, but levels will change as we do more and more mixing. The next thing to do is put on all the low cuts. The low cut sits just below the EQ assign button, and we should actually take a little time to consider, should we low cut the bass or the kick, because one of them must remain unlow cut. In this case we've decided to leave the kick drum with no low cuts, as you can see right there. All the rest are low cut. I should turn the music down. After we've done low cuts, chosen the kick or the bass, we're going to do the panning. The law of panning is that the kick must be in the center. We need to listen carefully to hear where the snare drum is. In this song, the snare drum is sitting on the left in the overheads, so we pan it and the hi-hat to the left, because they will both be sitting next to each other in the panoramic mix, because that's how they are placed on a drum kit. Next we've got 2 toms. We're going to pan them one towards the snare a little bit, because that's where it would sit in the overheads, and the other one is towards the right hand side, because it was a floor tom. Tom 3 is always a floor tom. The overheads left and right, hard panned always left and right. Then we have a bass guitar, must be center, that's on channel 8. Then we've got a rhythm guitar, that we're going to pan, I think we'll pan that a little bit to the right, because we've got a snare and hi-hat already on the left, and we don't want to overload the left. And then the lead vocal on channel 10 is going to remain dead center. Next, it's very advisable to do the compression. Compression is going to change the dynamic range. I'm going to swing over. We need to look at the sheet. On the sheet, we find on patch bay 2, 1 to 16 are the channel inserts, 17 to 24 are our 8 compressors. On the rack, we see we've got 8 compressors in pairs of 2, but we can use them individually because they are not connected to each other. They're individual compressors. So each channel on the desk has an insert. So we would like to compress the kick, the bass, and the lead vocal in the minimum. If we've got time, the snare. The kick is on channel 1, therefore we need to use insert 1 on patch bay 2. So here you can see we're patching from the output of insert 1, and we're going to go into compressor 1, and it's on the same patch bay, and you can see we've gone into the input, which is the bottom pot. Then we're going to return from the compressor back into the patch bay. I'm going to swing up to look at the compressor. There you can see the compressor is getting the kick drum signal, so we've routed it correctly. Now, kick drums usually use a compression of 4 or 5 to 1. Turn the ratio to 5 to 1 in this example. You can see it's on 5 to 1. Then we're going to decide on a gain reduction of at least 9 or 10 or 12 decibels. Turn the threshold anti-clockwise, and there you can see just above the threshold, there you can see the red lights showing us the gain reduction. Here you can see we've got sort of an average of 6, we'd like a little bit more, longer, average of 9 decibels. There we go. Then the next thing we have to do is go to the output gain and put on 9 decibels. There you can see we're putting on the 9 decibels. Perfect. That's pretty perfect. That's all you're going to do on compression. We are not using the attack. We are not using the release. We'll patch another instrument. Let's patch the bass, Linda. So we come back down to the patch bay. It's patch bay 2. The bass is what channel?
Channel 8.
Channel 8. So we're going to go out of channel 8 into the next compressor, out of the compressor, back into channel 8. So you can see we're using 2 compressors in a row. There you can see, this is the compressor next to the bass. You can see the signal. We're going to use a ratio of 4:1. So we turn it to 4:1. We want a gain reduction of about 9 again. We're going to turn the threshold anti-clockwise. There we see 9, and then we must go and put the output up by 9 at least. I think that's all we need to compress, but in your exam you will need to do a 3rd instrument, and if I were you, I would do the lead vocal.
Group compression.
Now we're going to do the group compression. I'm going to walk back to the mixing desk, and when I look at this particular song, the most advisable instruments to group compress here would be the overheads. First thing to do, make sure the overheads are identical levels. There they are on channel 6 and 7. No, they're not. Yes, they are. So they must be identical levels. They must be hard panned. Take off the left-right mix. Put on group 3 and 4. We don't have groups 1 and 2 patched, so it must be 3 or 4 or 5 and 6. Over here at the group faders, put up groups 3 and 4 and depress the left-right mix on 3 and 4 so that we can hear the compression from the channel faders and not from the channel. So on the channel, you can see if I zoom in, the left-right mix is not assigned for group compression. I'm now swinging back to the patch bay, where we're looking on our patch bay sheet for the group inserts, and there you can see them. Patch bay 1, channels 21 to 24. For groups 3 to 6, there's 4 inserts. We always must use 2 groups when we do group compress, even if we're group compressing 2 instruments or 5 instruments. Therefore, we're going to use 2 inserts. We use groups 3 and 4, so we're going to use inserts 3 and 4 for the groups. They're here on the top patch bay. There's group insert 3, 21. It's going to go into the next compressor in the row. Remember, we used one already for the kick and one for the snare. Group insert going, returning. Now we have to do group insert 4, because we have to compress in groups. It's going into the 4th compressor now, out of the 4th compressor, back into the groups. So if we look now, we can see the top 2 compressors are doing the kick and the bass, and then below them the next 2 are doing the overheads. Now, so they've got a little less gain, as you can see, a little less green flashing. That's just showing us the input gain. Now the correct way to set compressors for group compression is this, and it's very, very important. We're going to set one compressor first. So here we are, we're going to set a ratio of about 3:1 for these overheads. There we can see it's set at 3:1, and we're going to look for a gain reduction maybe of about 6 decibels. So we turn the threshold anti-clockwise, and there we can see there on average it's, well, it's sort of peaking at 6. So it's probably averaging about 4 decibels, mostly between 4 and 6. Then we're going to go and apply makeup gain. We'll apply 5 decibels of output makeup gain. There we go, because that's averaging about 4 and 6. Now, move to the second compressor right next to it, and we ignore the gain reduction and the input level. We just set it identically to the first, ignoring that the gain reduction may be different or anything else. So the first one was set at 35 decibels. So we go with the ratio of 3:1. So we set the ratio 3:1 on the second compressor, 35 decibels for the threshold. And then we put the makeup gain identically to the first one. Here is the first one. It's on 5. So we go and put the second one on 5. So if we look at it, I've panned back, you can see that the gain reduction may not match. That's not what we're concerned with. We're concerned with the fact that both compressors have identical settings. The next thing we're going to do is the effects. There's 2 ways of doing the effects: 2 monos or 2 stereos. So firstly we'll demonstrate 2 monos, and we will put the effects on the both of the effects on the lead vocal on channel 10, because the rest of the instruments are going to need stereo effects. So back we go to the patch bay. First thing to do, in this case we've got the lexicon working. Go up to the lexicon and set it as it is now on routing 1. You can see that green light. Routing 1 means 2 monos. Then we're going to go and set it to have a reverb, and so green light here, we'll set it to large plate. And then the second, we go to the effect select on processor 2, and we're going to put the second one on studio delay. So we keep pressing it until we get to studio delay. Now we've got two effects. One green is the plate, is reverb, and the studio delay is the red one. Right, then we come to the patch bay. Now, according to our patch bay sheet, the lexicon is 3 to 4 on patch bay 1, and the auxiliaries are 7 to 9 on patch bay 1, as you can see. So, first we're on patch bay 1, output 3. Are you going from the auxiliary? Yep. Auxiliary 1 out into the lexicon input, which is below 3, and then we're going to go the output of the lexicon back into auxiliary return 1. See, the red cable is going to auxiliary return 1. Now we're going to do auxiliary return 2 for the second effect. It's going to go into, that's auxiliary send 2, into. Selene is making the classic error of output to output, which, as you know. Anyway, now we're going out of the effects unit into auxiliary 2 left. Notice we don't return into channel 32, which is auxiliary 1's right. So we're using 2 auxiliaries on the top, and we're using both the left returns of those 2 auxiliaries. Right, we're going to swing to the desk. On channel 10, we're going to turn up auxiliary 1 and auxiliary 2, and we're going to move over to the master auxiliaries, turn up. A bird has pooped on our auxiliaries longer.
I see that.
Auxiliary 1 up and the master of 2 up. Then we go to the return master, both of them go up, and not forgetting to assign them to the left-right mix so that we can hear them. That will route the effects return to the left-right mix. At the top of the desk, we need to ensure that only the left one is plugged in, so we unplug the right auxiliary return. So we only have 2 lefts plugged in over there to make sure that the desk knows it's getting a mono return. On our effects unit, we can see that it's correctly routed because you can see the input lights flashing on the 2 different inputs. Now we're going to demonstrate a summed stereo return if we're going to use 2 stereos instead of 2 monos. Up here, we need to choose routing number 4 on the effects unit. Down here, let's unplug these cables so that we can repatch from the beginning. Right, so we're going to go from auxiliary 1, which is number 7, into the effects unit input, and then we're going to come out in stereo, back into auxiliary 1 return, just under, that's the left, and now we have to have the right return because it's stereo, and that's going to go into auxiliary 1 return right. Now we have to do the second effect, so we're going to go from auxiliary 2, there's auxiliary 2 in blue cable, and it's going to return, it's not going to return, it's going to go into the second input of the lexicon, and no return because the two black cables, which are the sum stereo return, are already going into the auxiliary 1 left and right return, so there will be no returns coming into 2. Auxiliary 2 returns will not be plugged in. Back on the mixing desk, we are going to take the effects off of the vocal on channel 10 because we don't want stereo on the vocal. Instead, we're going to put the stereo reverb on the snare. Channel 2, turn up auxiliary 1. Over here, auxiliary 1 is already up, and the return is up, and the left-right mix is depressed. Now we must let's put the other effect on the overheads, so we go to 6 and 7, and put up auxiliary 2. We come to auxiliary 2 master, that must go up, and no return, and no main mix return, no left right mix. So 2 auxiliary send masters are up, only 1 return because it's a summed stereo return. Of course, also we would need to change the second effect to another reverb, so I'm going to go and put it onto a large hall reverb because 2 reverbs would be more suitable for a snare and an overhead than delay on an overhead. So first thing to do is depress the EQ in button on channel 10. Then we're going to put on 200 Hertz, we'll apply 6 decibels of boost. So we find 200 Hertz on the bottom pot of the semi-parametric, and on the top pot we're going to put on 6 decibels. You can see that those 2 pots, frequency and the boost and cut, are joined with a little bracket. Now let's go up here and let's give him some high frequencies. We are going to boost 1000 Hertz by at least 3 decibels. So we choose 1000 Hertz, and then at the top we boost that, and that's not enough. Put some more. Let's put on another. Let's go up to 7 decibels, Mr. O'Leary. So it's nearly. That sounds better. Then on the kick drum, let's go to the kick drum. Apply the EQ in on the kick drum. On the kick drum, we will push up on using the bottom shelf 80 Hertz by 6 decibels. That's fantastic. So the last thing to do is apply multiband compression and graphic EQ. And so this is the equivalent of the mastering that you would do in digital on WaveLab. But we're not going to do the mastering on WaveLab. We're going to apply this in an analog scenario. So there on patch bay 1 you see 17 and 18 are the graphic EQ, 19 to 20 the multiband compressor. And they are sitting here above the rack. There's the graphic on top and the multiband below. So we go to patch bay 1 where the graphic EQ is on 17 and 18 and the multiband on 19, and we need the main mix inserts to route through the graphic and the multiband. Remembering always to do graphic first. Main mix inserts, if we take a look at our sheet, are 15. So we're going to go from 15 out into the graphic, which is on 17. So below 17 is the graphics input. So that's the right hand side of the main mix insert, always 2 because we're in stereo. At the top, we can see that we've correctly routed it. because there we see it flashing. I'm just going to quickly make it more equal. There we go. There we see the graphic getting the signal. And we come back down to the patch bay. The graphic, the main mix insert into graphic in 2 red cables. Now we're going graphic out into multi-band compressor input. And the multi-band compressor is 19. There we see 19. And then we enter the second graphic out into the multi-band. This is the right, into the multi-band right. And if we go up to look at the multi-band, we'll see there it has input signals on left and right. And there you see the graphic and the multi-band together. Now we have to return this to the main mix insert using these horrible L-shaped cables. Main mix, that's the multi-band output into the main mix insert left. And now we're going to go multi-band output right into the main mix insert right. So now our patch bay is looking quite busy. It's quite colourful, Mr. Lady, I must say. Okay, so this is the very tail end of the analog exam, and we have done everything, the EQ, the compression, the effects. We've put on the multiband, we've put on the graphic EQ, we've mixed the song, we've done the panning. Now we need to get our final song into WaveLab to start the mastering process. The mastering process and edits would take place in WaveLab whether you have done an analog mixdown or a digital mixdown. So mastering takes place regardless. But today we're doing the end of the analog mixdown. We've done all the processes. So the last thing we have to do is get it into WaveLab. WaveLab, when it opens, is going to look just like this. You are going to find this red record button. Click on it, and up comes the recording window. You can leave it just like that, and then we need to get 2 patch cables. My goodness, I have 2 cables. Here we go. 2 patch cables. Right, so what we want them to do is go from the main mix outputs, not the inserts, that's where we put the compressor and EQ. We're going main mix outputs into the M audio converter inputs. Where are they? Oh, here they are on patch bay 3. Main mix outputs to the first 2 M audio converter inputs, which we happen to know are the balanced inputs, as are inputs 9 and 10. So, main mix outputs is 1 and 2 on the top patch bay, and they're going to go into 1 and 2 on patch bay 3 inputs. Output is top into input, which is the bottom socket. Please take note that it must be going in stereo, left to left, right to right. Once we've done that, we come over to WaveLab, and there we see our mix down showing. It will be a little bit uneven because we've got panning, and we expect that. And what we need to do now, the same applies as in Cubase. We want to get the peak of this to be up to -1. At the moment it's too low, so I'm going to push up the channels a little bit, and I'm going to push up the main mixes on unity gain. I see now that I've peaked at 0, so I'm going to have to bring something down just a little bit. I can reset the meter so that I can see what the peak is again. We're wanting this peak to be, now that's pretty perfect. Okay, there was a 0. So I've got to come down a bit more, take a little bit off. I'm going to reset again, and I don't want to peak above -1 for the whole song. So that's looking quite good. There you can see that red is -1.3, it's just gone over, so that is pretty good. Reset. But in your exam, I'm not, there we go, that's pretty good. Press record, and then press stop, just so we can see there is our song getting recorded in stereo form and ready for us to do the mastering edits.